Hi, Mr. Richards here. Today's lesson is on ratio and proportions. A ratio is a comparison of two numbers by division. And the ratio of x to y can be expressed in the following ways. We could do this x over y. We could do this x with the colon y. And we could do this with the word 2, x to y. Now, an equation stating that two ratios are equal is a proportion. So, an equation stating two ratios are equal. And so we could have something like 2 over 4 is a ratio, and that could equal 4 over 8. And that's a proportion. What we'll be doing today, though, is taking one of these numbers out and trying to solve for it. However, before we solve, we first need to determine whether each pair of ratios are equivalent ratios. Right? Yes or no? Justify your answer. What we need to do is to look at, well, does 7/8 equal 49/56? What we're going to use today are cross products. And so I'm going to look at the cross product here of 7 times 56, and I need to determine, is that equal to the cross product of 8 times 49? When I multiply 7 times 56, that product is 392. Is that equal to 8 times 49? Well, 8 times 49 is also 392. And so yes, 392 is equal to 392, which means 7/8 is equal to 49/56. So our answer is yes, a proportion the cross products are equal. In example 2, we're going to follow the same logic. Determine whether each pair of ratios are equivalent ratios. Right? Yes or no? So we'll set up 25 hundredths over 6. And is that equal to 1 and 25 hundredths over 2? Well, let's cross multiply. 25 hundredths multiplied by 2 is going to need to equal 6 multiplied by 1 and 25 hundredths. 25 hundredths multiplied by 2 is 5/10, or 50 hundredths. Is that equal to 6 times 1 and 25 hundredths? Well, that product is 7 and 5/10. And since 5/10 or 50 hundredths is not equal to 7 and 5/10, this is not a proportion, so no. What about B? Well, is 2 over 2.5 equal to 16 over 20? Let's examine the cross products. 2 times 20 needs to equal 2.5 times 16. 2 multiplied by 20 is 40. 2.5 times 16 is also 40. And since 40 equals 40, the answer is yes, this is a proportion. Now we're going to use cross products in order to solve proportions. So we'll rewrite this out. N over 12 equals 3 over 8. And so we'll use the cross products now. And we'll write N times 8 needs to equal 12 times 3. Now the order which you write these does not matter as long as you have the n with the 8 and the 12 with the 3. Now n times 8 simplifies into 8n, and that's going to equal 12 times 3, which simplifies into 36. And now I have a handy-dandy one-step equation where if I divide by 8 on both sides, n is going to equal 4 5/10. Now this is a fun question. X plus 4 over 12 equals 3 over 4. Let's rewrite this. And I'll put this x plus 4 in parentheses. Over 12 is going to equal 3 over 4. And the reason why I'm going to put this in parentheses should be pretty clear in a moment. We're going to multiply the 4 by the x plus 4. And we'll set that equal to the 12 times 3. Well, distribute 4 times x and 4 times 4. 4 times x is 4x. 4 times 4 is 16, equals 12 times 3, which is 36. Then if we subtract 16 from both sides to solve the two-step equation, this cancels out. We're left with 4x equals 20. Lastly, divide by 4 on both sides, and x is going to equal 5. So our solution here is x equals 5. Now along with ratio and proportions comes rate and unit rate. A rate is the ratio of two measurements with different units of measure. An example of a rate could be something along the lines of 60 miles in 3 hours. Notice we have different units of measure, miles and hours. What about unit rate? A unit rate is a ratio of two quantities the second, which is 1 unit. In other words, we could take our 60 miles per hour and make our bottom unit 1 hour. And the equivalent, if we divided by 3 to get 1 hour, 60 divided by 3 could be 20 miles. So 20 miles per 1 hour would be the unit rate of 60 miles over 3 hours. Now let's take a look at example 4. The gear on a bicycle is 8 to 5. This means that for every 8 turns of the pedals, the wheel turns 5 times. Suppose the bicycle wheel turns about 2,435 times during a trip. How many times would you have to crank the pedals during the trip? Now we can set up a proportion with these two rates so that 8 pedal turns over 5 wheel turns is going to be equal to, we have 2,435 wheel turns. So 2,435 wheel turns will go on the bottom so that wheels can match wheels. And then we're going to have our missing pedals. So X pedal turns. And now we get to cross multiply and use cross products to solve the proportion. 8 times 2,435 is going to be set equal to 5 times x. 8 multiplied by 2,435 is 19,480, and that's going to equal 5x. Lastly, if I divide by this 5 on both sides, my solution, 3,896, is going to equal x, and that is our number of petal turns. Also in our lesson on ratios and proportions are our definitions of scale and scale model. For scale, this is the relationship between the measurements on a drawing or model and the measurements of the real object. As for scale model, this is a model used to represent an object that is too small or too large to be built at actual size. A lot of the times you'll see scale models for buildings when architects are putting together a plan. Also, you'll see scales on maps. In a road atlas, the scale for the map of Connecticut is 5 inches equals 41 miles. What is the distance in miles represented by 2½ inches on the map? Well, like our last example, we're going to set up a proportion. Let's take our map scale first. 5 inches over 41 miles. Now, writing our units out will help us to set this up and not make mistakes. What is the distance in miles represented by 2½ inches on the map? Well, our inches need to match the inches on top, so we'll put our 2½ inches on top here. We don't know the miles, so that's going to be x miles on the bottom. So we have the scale of the map, inches over miles, and then our actual inches over miles. Well, if we cross multiply this and solve, we have 5 multiplied by x is going to equal 41 times 2½ So 5x equals, the product of 41 and 2½ is 102 5/10, and that half. And to finish the question, divide by 5 on both sides. And our answer is going to be x equals 20 5/10, or 20½ miles is our unit on this question. And that is it for this lesson on ratios and proportions that also included some information on rates, unit rates, scales, and scale models. Good luck.